Hi everyone, welcome to this month's Kidneys in the Kitchen. I'm Megan Craig, Director of Programs for the National Kidney Foundation of Illinois. I am joined, as always, by a beautiful dietitian who's going to talk with you today about kidney-friendly treats for trying to keep cool during the summer months as it gets hotter out there. So, Nicoletta, you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. My name is Nicoletta Lavagna. I am a pediatric kidney dietitian at Lurie Children's Hospital in Chicago. As always, yes, I work with a kidney pediatric population. However, we're going to be talking about general kidney disease and how this applies across all ages.
Wonderful. So I see we have some great stuff here. How can people with kidney disease keep cool during the summer months as it gets hotter?
Gets difficult, especially if you are on a fluid restriction. Those are kind of our most challenging patients. However, there's really two ways to keep cool, keeping cool on the outside, so outside of your body, as well as kind of your internal body regulation.
Okay, so keeping cool on the outside, that's
So
not wearing black, I guess?
Exactly.
Okay.
So, keeping cool, thinking of shady places or staying indoors as much as you can with air conditioning, especially when it's really hot during those brutal months. Like you said, with the clothing, maybe not black, maybe not dark colors, maybe some lighter colors, some looser fitting clothes so that they can kind of breathe a little bit if you're sweating. Another way would be maybe a cold towel. So you can kind of control that, putting it on, the back of your neck or something like that if you want to kind of keep cool. Or even some of those mist bottles with the fans attached to them.
Oh yeah, those are fun.
If you're outside, and you maybe can't be in the shade, that would be another little tip to try.
Sure, of course. And we know that in extreme heat, there are almost always cooling centers that usually a local government, the city or county, will make sure people have access to. So if you're really desperate, don't just stay in a super hot place. Please do try to find a cooling center as well.
Correct. So those would be some things that you can hopefully try to control. And then we kind of get into ourselves, looking at ourselves, and depending on, what type of diet we're on, how we can follow that. So drinking cool fluids, may not be the easiest way to cool down. It may sound interesting, but, when we think about our internal body temperature, when you want to cool down, then you think of really kind of guzzling down something, and that could become
a cold glass of ice water.
That could become dangerous, especially if you're on a fluid restriction, because if you finish your whole fluid restriction or even half by, let's say, 11 a.m. or noon, then you run the risk of, being fluid overloaded and then having a hard time at dialysis and kind of a domino effect after that.
Yeah. So not chugging water, definitely not the way to go if you're on a fluid restriction.
Definitely.
Maybe if you're not on a fluid restriction, getting a bunch of cold water in you would be good.
You're right. So like if you're CKD stages 4 or 5, maybe on a fluid restriction, dialysis, you're going to have a few different recommendations, especially during the summertime. Will be a little bit more challenging. However, some of the ones with early kidney disease that need the fluid, or even post-transplant that really need some extra fluid, yes, we would then recommend drinking that extra fluid to keep hydrated and keep up with the excess sweat throughout the summer months.
All right, so we're talking about fluid restriction, and I see that we have some frozen, what probably was once juice here. So we've got the frozen fruit bars or popsicles and some Italian ice. So does that count toward your fluid restriction, since it was fluid and will be fluid once you eat it?
Correct. So that's a great question. So when we think of fluid and fluid restrictions in general, we have to keep in mind quite a bit of things. So obviously anything liquid at room temperature, so your water, your juices, your soda, anything that you can really drink, that will count towards your fluid. And really then we get into anything that melts.
Yeah, liquid. These would be liquid at room temperature.
Exactly. So you're right. So any popsicles, any Italian ice, soups, that are broth based, soups count as fluid. Some fruits that they may not melt to that liquid. However, if you think of watermelon, that contains a lot of water, so that's going to count a little bit towards. Jello is another one that
Oh.
counts. I mean, I know it truly does melt if you do leave it out long enough. And then even ice creams, sherbet, again, kind of anything that will melt to that liquid at room temperature.
Okay.
And then with that as well, if we think about ice, so, ice can be something that, people don't really think about because they're like, oh, I'm just chewing on ice. Well, that also melts down to water. So just a good rule of thumb is if you, let's say, put a full cup of ice, that usually melts to half.
Okay.
So really that would count towards a half a cup of
Okay.
your fluid, if that makes sense.
Sure.
But when we think of kind of those on fluid restrictions, some tips to kind of think about in the summertime to stay cool. One thing is everyone has to take their medications, at some point in the day. So trying, if you can, again, depending on what your regimen is, and always check with your doctor if you can take them with meals to avoid, compounding how much fluid you have through the day.
Sure.
That's a good tip. Some can take them with applesauce. That's another tip to kind of get rid of some of that fluid there, but take them with applesauce. So you're not drinking extra water just for medication purposes.
Sure.
Again, if you can, but you got to check with your doctor if you can take those for meal times. Drinking only when thirsty. So sometimes our bodies trick us and really we think we're thirsty and we may be hungry, or in the summertime, it could be boredom too. If you think about it and you're not really doing anything and you're just sitting there, you're going to be thinking about being hot, and the more you think about it, you're going to want to drink more. So that's just kind of a mind game you'd have to play with yourself to see if you're really truly thirsty. And then when we say drinking when thirsty, taking small sips at a time.
So again, not just guzzling all that water within a couple minutes or...
Correct, because if you do have that fluid restriction, you have to space it out within your 24-hour limit.
Okay.
When you're thinking of, drinking smaller, maybe not filling up that big glass anymore, maybe using smaller cups that you have in your house. That can kind of trick your mind too. If you only fill up a little bit instead of, full glass, that helps. And choosing sugar-free or even caffeine-free beverages. Obviously, we know that teas or coffees or some carbonated pops and beverages that have caffeine actually end up dehydrating us. So choosing some of those sugar-free or just, again, going back to water will actually keep you hydrated instead of the opposite.
Yeah, you'll notice we talk a lot about water here, and it's because water is the best beverage.
Correct.
Plain water is always the way to go for your kidneys.
Yep.
Even if you're on a fluid restriction, it's just the smaller amount of water would be the best. But of course, we know people do drink and eat things that are not just pure water, which it is a good thing actually. But
Exactly. And tips I know that have come up in the past with just plain water are going to be, maybe adding fruit in the summertime. So berries or lemon, squeezing a lemon in there to give it some extra flavor.
sure.
To help with that.
Yeah, I think we even have some frozen fruit here, so you can maybe drop that and
Sure.
it'll make it cold and fruity all at once.
And yep, we'll get to some other tips with actual food items in a little bit. Another thing you can do would be to fill an ice cube tray with some water and some lemon juice. So again, you're filling, it would be an ice cube, but sucking on ice would last a little bit longer. So again, you're kind of tricking your mind into thinking that, you're satisfying that need for that thirst.
Sure.
That's a good tip. The next one, kind of the things we have in front of here. So, just to cool you down, maybe you're not thirsty and you just need something, So we have fruit bars as well as Italian ice here. Those are good options because, for example, these fruit bars right here, one is, it says 2.75 fluid ounces. So when we think about that, again, you can't overload it and have multiple, but if you just need something small, yes, that would count towards your fluid, but that would be a good choice.
It's not that much fluid
Correct.
for how long it would take you to get through the popsicle.
Exactly.
So that's my question also. Fruit bars we have here. Popsicles, same thing?
Same thing.
Okay.
So popsicles would, also a good choice. Also tend to melt, obviously, to a liquid
Sure,
at a room
yeah.
temperature. So that would count towards your fluid goal as well.
And when it comes to sugar content, are the fruit bars deceptively high sugar? I mean, are you going to get a lot lower sugar in a more like a whole fruit bar than in, say, one of those multicolored popsicles?
Depends. Again, we're going to go back to reading labels. So for example, we could take this one and let's zoom in here. So one bar is going to be 90 calories. Again, low sodium, so that's another good option here. We're always talking about sodium. And then 22 grams of carbohydrates. With that, of that 22, 20 grams are sugar.
Added sugars, yeah. Okay.
Exactly. A lot of added sugars here. So it's just really important to read those labels, to look, because they do have sugar-free options, like sugar-free popsicles. That could also be a good option.
Sure, yeah.
So you're kind of eating healthier, but also meeting that need for your thirst as well.
Okay.
Same thing would go for the Italian ice as well. Just kind of reading the labels, because as you just mentioned, sugar can be added into many things.
Can sneak in there.
Definitely. The next tip would be freezing some fruits. So low potassium fruits even. Again, for that population that may be on dialysis or, needs to watch their amount of potassium through the summer months. I know it's hard because fruit is good and, fresh fruit is the best. But some tips you can do is we have some berries here, or grapes. Frozen grapes are also a good one. Low potassium,
yeah.
And then just popping them in the freezer for a snack. Kind of turn out like ice cubes, but then you get that nice satisfying flavor from the grapes as well.
I know you kind of briefly mentioned watermelon before. It's my favorite summer fruit. So how do melon type fruits play in?
Sure. Watermelon, again, is going to have very high water content. While it can be considered a low potassium food, obviously anything that you eat in excess can become a high potassium food.
Okay.
So that's one hesitation. The other would be, again, the water content, just watching, how much you can have. So generally, we tend to limit our patients to 1 cup. If they can do that, some say, I want all or nothing, I want to be able to eat it. And then they'll just end up restricting it because they may not be able to have that 1 cup for the day. And then also, this is going to come up, I think, every time. But if you follow kind of a low sodium diet, that tends to decrease your thirst as well. Because as you know, I'm sure if you eat salty chips or snack foods like that, you tend to be pretty thirsty because salt drives our need for some water and your thirst. So following that can also help, which is, again, a part of the kidney diet in general.
Yeah, I think people who watch this show regularly are probably going to start thinking we have a bit of a war on sodium happening. It's not on purpose. It's just, we know that too much sodium, too much of anything,
Exactly.
can have a negative effect.
Yep, you're right. And you're exactly right. Too much of anything can have a negative effect on anyone, kidney disease or not. So another issue some of our patients have maybe in the summer is dry mouth. They'll complain of that.
That's the dialysis patients, right?
Dialysis patients, mainly, I would say, and especially those obviously watching their fluid restriction. If you're not allowed to, drink as much as you would want, then yes, you may have a dry mouth. So a few things to help with that would be lemon slices. So just kind of anything, that bitter, sour flavor kind of stimulates your salivary glands. So then it kind of helps to trick you into thinking that maybe something's in there. And then mints or hard candies or different things that obviously you can put in your mouth to suck on. Those can help relieve that dry mouth as well.
Sure, and I know we have sort of the sugared and sugar-free versions here. Any recommendation about sort of can people just have the one with sugar in it, or?
Like anything, again, we're going to kind of want to eat healthy in general, so sugar-free may be the better option. However, if you're not restricted, don't have diabetes, different things like that, you could tend to go towards the regular hard candy as well.
Okay.
So mints are a good option. Some of the sour candies people like Jolly Ranchers even, those are going to be okay to suck on. Or even sugar-free gum to chew on.
Oh, sugar-free gum, yeah, good.
That
thought.
also can help as well.
Okay.
And the last one, dry mouth, works for some, not for all, but just rinsing your mouth with mouthwash.
Okay.
Making sure you obviously don't swallow that and spitting it out.
Right.
But that can sometimes help as well.
That would be a particularly bad way to increase your fluid intake.
Exactly. No one would be happy about that.
No, definitely not.
Definitely not.
All right. Well, thank you so much for all these awesome tips about
welcome.
keeping cool. I know that I tell you to do this every time, but please do visit our website for information about keeping cool in general and about all things kidney. So I've taken us to our diet and nutrition page here. You'll see we have lots of good apps, resources, tips, but that's not all that's at our website. We also have tons of information for all kinds of kidney patients and their families and caregivers. And you can find out information on all of our free programs and events. We would invite you to please attend any of those that interest you. We have programs for people in all stages of kidney disease, all the way through post-transplant, and some pediatric programs as well. That's the National Kidney Foundation of Illinois website, nkfi.org. That's like National Kidney Foundation Illinois.org, nkfi.org. So again, thank you so much for being here and for giving us all these great tips. And for you out there, we'll see you next time. Thank you.